Welcome to Off the Cuff with Kel, Conversations from the Front Line, a podcast and live show for survivors and the leaders who support them. I'm your host, Kelly Humphries, a survivor of child sexual abuse, advocate, author, speaker, ambassador, a lover of all things outdoors, with over 15 years of law enforcement experience. Please support me in my mission to break cycles of abuse and trauma. You can help by donating to my Patreon account at patreon.com/Kelly Humphries.
Oh my goodness, guys, we are back. It is 2024 and oh my God, I'm so sorry it's taken me so long because I'm so excited. We've got the amazing, rolling with the punches, the one and only boxer lady, Tiffanee Cook. Welcome to Off the Cuff.
Kelly, how are you, mate? Thank you.
Yeah, mate, I'm so excited. Tiff and I met through an amazing mutual friend, and I was already dragged into her amazing podcast a couple of weeks ago. It was so exciting. It was just an amazing conversation, which I will promise to share on my pages with you guys. Probably one of my best, which actually, well, when I say my best, I don't know about you, Tiff, but for me, it was just amazing. It was just a fantastic combo. And I just felt, I don't know, maybe I just grew up in 12 months. I don't know, something really cool happened and it was just fantastic. So I'm so excited to have you back, flipping it around and jumping on with me tonight. So before we go any further, guys, I just want to drop in a disclaimer that some of the content we may talk about tonight could be a little bit tough, might be a bit triggering. So if that's you and you are struggling, there's some phone numbers on my page at kellyhumphries.com. So please feel free to jump across to there. Tiff is an amazing human. She is also a survivor. So just during our conversation, we just had such a, I don't know, there were some really beautiful, vulnerable moments that we were able to share in that conversation. And it's really led me to, it's almost like part 1 and 2. Like I feel like it's part 1 and 2, even though it's different podcasts, you know. But it was just so great because I was just able to see this amazing fighter woman inside of you. And that's why I called this episode Against the Ropes, because I think for so many of us, we feel stuck in that place against the ropes, but you've managed to fight your way literally out of that space. And I'd love for you, particularly for the listeners, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your story. And then I really want to get into some challenging, crazy, cool stuff. We just had so many jokes before we started. So I'm hoping that we can talk some shit as well, because, you know, we've had a good start already, but I really want to get you to share your story with the Off the Cuff listeners. So
thanks, mate. And hopefully, listeners, we haven't used all the hilarious jokes because, God, you missed out. Oh, they were just rolling off Kelly's tongue. I just want to say that conversation we had, which just aired yesterday on my show, was absolutely one of my favorites. And from 2 fronts. One is I felt that the value for listeners was incredible, the way that you articulate and openly share. And I spoke about it. Funnily enough, this afternoon, I happened to have a session with my therapist, Dr. Bill, who all of my listeners are familiar with. And I was talking about it, and I said it was, you know, it's incredible to be able to speak to someone who's experienced something similar to you, and they're still experiencing components of it, which for you I felt were really raw. But to be able to talk about that and share that in a really safe way, both for yourself, for myself, and for anyone else to listen in, I think that's a really hard balance to manage. And I felt from the perspective when we were in the middle of it, and also when I listened later, I just thought it was really special. Something about coming together with you. So thank you.
I love it. I'm so excited.
Yeah, which is nothing about what you asked me to just say just now. So I probably should tell the world about me. So in a nutshell, I moved over from Tassie. I grew up in a little beach suburb in Tassie. In business, I lived in a shop and then a restaurant, and I lived what I thought was a pretty cool, and it was a really cool life and childhood. And I moved out of Tassie and moved to Melbourne when I was, what was I, maybe 18, 19-ish, maybe 17. I can't even really remember. But that came about, essentially I had a car accident, and that led to me moving to Melbourne. And I was never really sporty. I thought I was going to get into boxing, but I ended up at the ripe old age of 29 jumping in and doing a boxing challenge. So 29 years old, and the idea of that was kind of the same idea of moving from Tassie to Melbourne, and it was just, like, let's just dive in head first and show everyone. It was always show. I want to show everyone like how brave I am, how cool I am, how independent I am. I want to do the things that chicks don't do. That seemed to be this theme throughout life of like, just go get at it, do what gets a response from people, and show them that I'm not scared, that I'm going to be something. And so I ran into or stumbled across this 12-week boxing challenge at 29 years old, and I thought to myself, I'm going to give this a go. And so I did. At that point in time, I was working in corporate. All of my, I guess, my personality was quite a bravado. I was quite loud and rambunctious and all of the things, but little did I know that was quite a front for me. So I thought I told everyone, I'm going to do this boxing challenge. I'm getting in the ring. Everyone's going to pay $250. You're going to come see me get punched in the face. How awesome am I? Rah, rah, rah. All of the things. And a couple of weeks into training, I remember standing in front of one of the girls that I was training with, who became a really good friend of mine, and we were floating our gloves across, from one face to another, learning how we would catch and roll with the punches. And these weren't yet proper punches, but I remember not to keep my eyes open, face forward, and I have not the size of, I don't even know what, in my mouth, in my throat. And I was like, okay, as soon as this is finished, I'm going to cry. I'm going to go to my car and I'm going to cry my eyes out. And I didn't, because I didn't get time to cry. People talked to me too much throughout that training. But I think that really, from 2 weeks in, that really set the tone of the 12-week challenge. It was just being confronted, doubting myself, hearing the really loud voice of inner critic on my shoulder, knowing that I was the worst person in that gym. But yet there was this other part of me that knew something, that knew that that nothing was going to stop me from winning, and that I knew that I could, I knew I wasn't coordinated. I knew I wasn't great at this, but I knew I wasn't going to give up, and I knew I could get hit, and I knew I could keep getting back up. I knew that much. So I knew that I could work hard, and I just held on to that. So this could turn into a really long story. So pull me up at any point, Kelly. Intervene.
No, mate, it's great. I guess the one part that's really sticking out for me, and I think for many survivors, this is the thing, because fucking sure as hell it is for me. It's that part where you're like in the car and you're like, I don't even have time to cry, right? Like, and so you just go do another thing, right? And yes. I do that. And it's like that whole Coke bottle analogy, right? You like shake the Coke bottle, and yes. Fucking, if you take that lid off, it's going to explode, right? It's going to explode because you haven't been able to express that emotion. Now, if it doesn't come out, then it's going to come out somewhere else, right? Like whether you get sick, or like, you lash out at your partner, or you just project the shit that's inside of you because you have suppressed that. And I think, like, for myself, I think I mentioned even before the podcast, I'm like, I'm doing yoga. Like, to my listeners, I haven't actually divulged Kel is actually meditating. Oh my God. Like, she can sit still for like more than 5 seconds, which is like, doesn't happen, right? But what's happening is exactly what you were just talking about, is being confronted every moment, because the survivor in me and the survivor in you is wanting to, like, release something that's wanting to come out. And I guess I want to know, like, what was, when you did that, like when you were in the car and you had this feeling, like, what were you pushing down? What was that about?
Yeah, that's interesting, right? Because as you started highlighting this, I kind of went back and thought about it. And that was at a time where I didn't cry. And if I did cry, I removed myself from any other person. That was the idea, is when I get out to my car to leave this gym, I'm going to cry. So, and then I got talking for long enough that subsided, and I went out to the car and I moved on and forgot about it. So I suppressed things, and I wasn't even really aware that was not a typical thing. I just thought that's just what I did. In fact, I remember a couple of years into training, I remember we were doing a drill in the boxing gym. It was really hard, and I said to one of the trainers, like, I'm cooked. That's it. I'm done. Like, and he goes, really? You don't even look like you're trying. But the way he said it and looked at me, and I just thought about it so long afterwards, and I thought, oh, I know I don't show anything. Like, I know I don't show anger or emotion. You don't see when you hurt me, and you also like, I hide any of myself from being seen from, on the surface. And that was, which probably doesn't sound that profound to most people, but to me, I was like, oh, I didn't even realize that was a thing that I did.
And is that a thing you still do you think?
No, because I don't believe so. And I think that, because I think in one way I really wear my heart on my sleeve, but maybe just not when it meant something, not when I felt vulnerable, not when I think the idea of when I started unpacking a few years in, unpacking why boxing, and maybe let's talk about that. So, because I can tend to jump into parts of conversations and not brought the audience along. So I'm aware that they're like, what are you talking about?
Mate, I popcorn brain for a reason here.
Yeah, they're like, what are you referring to? A couple of years into boxing, I remember thinking, what's interesting? What's interesting is I'm doing this sport that I wasn't naturally good at, like this thing. Normally, I would only do things if I started it and I was some sort of superstar and people said, you're amazing at that. So I go, oh, well, then I'll do this. Obviously, I'm good at it. Boxing wasn't that for me. It was something I really wanted to do, but I wouldn't have done it unless this opportunity came up. But then I stuck at it and I was like, well, like everything else, I'm on to the next shiny object. I did yoga for a bit. I did running for 5 minutes. I did, like one of my boss's wives, he only had one. One of my bosses, his one wife. I remember her, she would always hang shit on me at work and go, what are you doing this week, Tiff? Like, that I never stuck at anything. And I was always like, well, yeah, at least when I die, I'll have never not done anything that I ever wanted to do. I'll have tried it all. But I come across this boxing and I was like, why is this really confronting thing that I don't feel very good at? Why do I keep returning to it? So I started, and at the same time, I started bringing up memories of this child sexual abuse that I'd experienced and suppressed and never really dealt with it. Like, I put it in this black box in the back of my mind, and I knew it happened, but it was my dirty little secret. It was the thing that no one knew, because then if you just don't admit it and you just move to a different city and do a different thing, then it just goes away, doesn't it? Like, that was my thought. And unfortunately, 3 decades of that's proven wrong. Doesn't just go away. You don't just forget about it. But I remember those memories like coming up and just thinking, like, what is it about this thing that is triggering memories and thoughts? And then I started looking at why would I be attracted to this? Okay, so there's obviously the idea of bringing up that sort of a memory sounds negative, sounds like not a nice thing, but everything about boxing I was drawn to in this positive way. So I started looking at I started journaling, realizing that actually I went for a walk with a friend of mine who's a clinical psych. And are you laughing at my popcorn brain? You totally are. I went for a walk.
I'm commiserating. I'm celebrating because it's, I also have said popcorn brain, so I'm following you just fine.
Everyone else is like, slow down and stay in one fucking conversation. So I go for a walk. I go for a walk with a friend. She's a clinical psychologist, and I said to her, "Hey, so hypothetically, because I'd been on Dr. Google, I've been able to be Googs, and I said, if someone experienced, sexual abuse as a child, and then they were an adult and they were fine, like, would they be fine?" And she something I probably articulated a bit better than that, but it was basically that was my question. Like, if someone experienced that, never dealt with it, they'd be sweet. And she was like, "Oh, absolutely not. They would, like her." It was a pretty hardcore answer. A couple of weeks later, she goes, "Oh, when you asked me that question, were you talking about XYZ, a particular person that we both knew?" And I was like, oh. No, I was actually talking about myself. And she almost died. Because obviously she would have answered very differently if she thought she was speaking to the subject. And so I started, going to seek therapy. But in the interim, I'd started just journaling, just writing stuff. And I can't remember a lot of what I journaled. A lot of it was just getting it out, writing. And I remember writing, just analysing the aspects of boxing that I felt landed, and maybe that's what linked me. And the first idea was this feeling of safety, like this feeling of familiarity in this place. Like, I was like, isn't it weird that everyone asks me if I'm getting scared of getting punched in the face, and I'm not? Like, that's a weird thing to not be scared of. It's a weird thing to go into a place where someone's trying to hurt you and you're isolated and you're alone and there's danger and you can't do anything about it. Or you can do anything about it. That's interesting to me. And I was like, oh, like is that what's connecting me to this feeling is familiarity. So it's not safety, it's actually just familiarity. And then looking at the healing aspects of it. So for me, it was visibility. It was reflecting on the fact that you're standing in the center of a ring and there's an opponent, and they are not on your side. They're there to hurt you. And they're not saying, they're not hiding that. It's not hidden. It's not behind closed doors. You're not telling a story about it. It's actually, there's an honesty to it. So it was like the honesty of boxing and the fact that everyone outside the ring who loves me is watching that happen, but they can't help me. Only I can help me. And so there's always these little aspects. Like, I get goosebumps when I think of them because for me, they translate, and I go, yeah, I get that. That like, it's that moment of, how we talk to people like Dr. Bruce Berry, who I've had on my show, who wrote What Happened to You, and that's all about childhood trauma. And I asked him the question, why do we repeat? Why do we go back to the things that hurt us? Why do I listen to interviews about women who have come out of domestic violence and they find themselves repeating those patterns? Why do people like myself and anyone who's experienced childhood sexual abuse, why do we walk out into the world as adults and find ourselves unprotected in ways that shouldn't be? Like, why are we experiencing it again? Why is it happening to us and around us? And I can't remember exactly where I was going with that.
Well, I think what you mate, I think you burnt the popcorn. But, like, I think where you go, like, it's that whole look, we sabotage ourselves for a start because we don't like to feel uncomfortable, right? So we're always drawn into this familiarity, right? So we do repeat patterns of behavior because when we're in a growth space and it's uncomfortable, we're like, oh, that's really scary, right? It's kind of like when you're sitting in the car and you're like, I'm not going to cry now, because you know that if you do, it's actually going to be really uncomfortable. So you don't actually allow yourself to express that emotion. So you choose to go back into the chaos or go back into what you know, because that's what's always worked before, right? So we just repeat these patterns of behavior. And you're right, it is also about being like familiar. But I've been kind of thinking, I've been thinking a lot about our conversations, and like I'm really curious, particularly for yourself, like there's this one photo. So when we do these podcasts, I ask, you know, my guests to send me photos, right? And Tiff's got all these really cool photos that she sent me, and there's this one picture of her literally against the ropes, right? And it's a black and white photo, and you're literally getting your face punched, but you're also punching this other chick in the face at the same time. I'm like, go girl, like, you know, it's that moment. And when you were talking and you were sharing before, it was really like, okay, popcorning. I have this moment, right, where I think of what would happen if I saw my uncle again. So my uncle was the one who sexually abused me from the age of 8 up until 15, right? And I have this one image in my head of me literally, like, all I do when I see him is I literally punch him, and I can see it's like slow motion, and his head goes back, and I'm like, and he's got down and out, like total KO, right? I see this. It's this vision I've had since I was a child, since this happened to me, right? So I saw this picture of you, like literally against the ropes, and I can see this picture in my head of you, like as a kid, and you're talking about familiar spaces, right? And you're talking about knowing the person that's in the ring, and it's transparent, right? Like, what is that barrier that you're crossing over? Like, you're against the ropes and you're there, and you're like, you know you have to like defend yourself. You know that you have to make a choice right then and there to take that step. Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, what is that decision, and what is that process that's happening that you're like, I know this is going to fucking hurt. This is going to be so hard, but I can't do anything else right now. I have to move. I have to step through this, right? Like, I feel like when you're talking about your boxing journey, you're talking about these steps that, like me thinking as a child, like I really want to just punch this fucker in the face. Like, you know, like I do, but I was so scared, right? I didn't have that courage to step through that. And every time you've got that opponent in that ring, like, you've learned that to just step through that. Like, what is that process? Like, what is that thing that you choose?
I think
because
so. A lot of what I see about me in the boxing ring. So the reason I love the boxing ring is I've always talked about it as being the first and maybe only place where my mask fell off, and I didn't know I was wearing a mask, and it fell off, and I went, "Who the fuck is this person?" Like, who?
Popcorn.
Yeah, like, boom. I'm in my 30s now, and I've lived my whole life telling the world a story about this character, and she don't exist. And underneath all of that, there's this other person, and I don't know who she is. And she's got no family because her family knows this other facade, this other character that's been built for 30 years. And having an awareness on who you are in the moment. So in the boxing ring, it was a place where you can't construct an answer. You can only react based on instinct, and then you retrain your instinct. And I feel like when we recover from trauma, that translates. You can't, when I speak to people about stuff they're in the middle of, it's really, you can't change the mechanics of what you're in the middle of when you're in the middle of it. You can't start a car and then pull the fucking engine apart. You have to take the engine apart, fix shit, and then start the car. You know, so I get in the ring if that translates. Not that I know fucking anything about cars or engines, by the way. So that was a bad analogy. But so inside the boxing ring, I would go in, I'd have an experience. And the first few fights was literally a whirlwind. But you know what I remember about the first fight? I remember waddling back to the hopefully I didn't waddle. Toddling back to the corner. I remember winning the fight, or no, before that, I remember being back in the corner and my trainer being, "What the fuck are you doing? Why are you stopping? You don't stop until the ref stops you." I had no awareness that I was stopping, but when my opponent would cower and stop fighting, I would stop fighting. It wasn't conscious. I wasn't conscious when I was in there. I was in there under fight or flight, having a reaction. And it took me quite a few fights before I didn't know the difference between winning or losing in terms of how my performance was, because I didn't have that introspection. I was in there in the middle of chaos. And then afterwards I would get the opportunity to reflect on that. Who was I? How did I respond? Can I identify some feelings and some characteristics that I saw in there that worked for me and that worked against me? And number one for me is, where else do they play out in life? Because that's where the real change happens. And how do I change them, and do I want to change them? And when it came to doing therapy on my background, on my childhood, it was a big question to ask. I was out with injury for 3 years, and I was like, Tiff, if you're going to go to therapy and work on feeling your emotions, you are going to hand in ownership of one of your biggest strengths in the boxing ring, which is dissociation, which is the inability to feel. You don't want to be in there emotional. You don't want to be reacting on anger and fear, and you don't want to be that 7-year-old girl in the boxing ring. You want to be dissociated, like I was, just doing the thing and then processing it later when you don't have to operate. And so, yeah, I think for me it's more about reflecting afterwards. Who was I then? And have I changed? And does it look like the person I want to be? And that goes hand in hand, both in and out of, and mostly for me, out of the ring. Like, it's a real place of really, really knowing myself. Who am I? Because I believed myself for 30 years. You're independent, you're tough, you're this, you're that, you're all that. And it was like, at the end of the day, when people asked why I wasn't getting scared about getting punched in the face, and I didn't know what I was scared of, and I asked myself enough times, and then when I stumbled across the idea in my head of vulnerability and connection and relationships and people and love and family and intimacy, that shit, I still, when I say those words now, I've got goosebumps throughout my body. Like, that stuff and I went, oh, fuck. Like, punch me in the face any day, but don't tell anyone I'm scared of all that stuff.
What a very fucking powerful revelation, mate. Like, and I seriously, I get it. And I think for many survivors, we go through life completely disassociated. And, but like the moment when you're in the car, that very first time, we choose not to reflect, because reflection means pain. Reflection means it's going to hurt. So I think that it sounds very courageous that you actually give yourself the opportunity to reflect now on who you're becoming, because of your being against the ropes, because of you being in that boxing ring. And there was one part you just mentioned about you don't want to be that 7-year-old girl, but I think you are that 7-year-old girl. That is, and I know for me, it was something that we started to talk about during our last conversation on your Roll with the Punches, was about that little person inside of us. And as adults, we're so fucking hard on ourselves. Like, we just judge ourselves so harshly for the things that we have to do to survive. Who we've become in the process of the wiring our brain has had to do to cope, the disassociation that we've learned, the disconnection that we've had, and the people that we've lost in our life because we've been in survival mode and unable to really take those punches. you know, unable to really step through that. And I think for so many of our listeners, particularly for this, it's a constant struggle to be fully present. Like I'm to be completely transparent, I'm on this massive journey right now. So for many of my listeners know, I resigned from the police last year in August because my mental health was just outside PTSD from being a first responder, but it was also activating my vicarious trauma, activating my PTSD from childhood stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what the psychiatrist has said to me, that's what it is. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. But it's only now, right? After I've been an advocate since 2015 speaking about this, I've written my book, I've done all this stuff, you know, I've been a copper for 16 years. I'm like, fucking, I should know. Like, I should know this shit, right? Fucking, I'm all over this, like a fat kid, I'm smarty. No. You know, like, I'm not, because all of a sudden I'm not actually disassociated anymore, right? I'm actually, you know, I've taken time to reflect, but I hadn't taken time to acknowledge what I was actually feeling. And I went, oh, fuck, this is new. I'm actually really angry. Tiff, what fucking gloves do I buy? Because I'm about to lash out for the first time in my life, because we are expected to be controlled. We're expected to contain our anger. We're expected to act a certain way, say certain things, behave, right, in a certain way. Or even we're told how to feel. Oh, you should be very angry about that. Oh, don't you think you should be like, you know, reporting that? Or don't you think you should like talk to somebody about that? Like everything has to happen in your right time. Like I could never have predicted this journey. Like I literally came from the yoga studio to like going, the fuck is this yoga? And like, why am I crying in the middle of a yoga session? Oh my God, like body fucking keeps the score. Yes, it does. Okay. Of course it does.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, but I've never given myself the time to say, hey, you did good, right? You did good as a little kid. Like, you should be really proud of her. Like, because here I am so afraid to fucking get one thing wrong. Whereas little me would fucking do anything. She could do anything. She could do anything. And I feel like when I look at you and I'm listening to your journey and I'm listening to this song, your song, look, there's a lot in that. And the Tiff is like, and I wasn't ready to talk about this, but here we are, we're here. Mark Seymour and the Undertow, Tiff is like the pinup girl for this amazing song that Mark has written called The Boxer. And if you watch the film clip, it is just so fucking inspiring. So inspiring. And I look at that and I just think, I don't see you as this adult. I see you as this like fighting little person in there just going, yeah, fucking yeah. Like, you know, and I feel like we don't acknowledge that little person who actually was so brave. Actually was so brave. Because as an adult, we're looking back going, oh, well, I should have done this and I should have done that and I should have said something and I should have told somebody, you know, I should have done this instead. And we like judge ourselves so harshly. And I don't know, every moment that I'm making decisions or moving through this emotional shit all of a sudden, it takes more fucking courage than I feel like I've ever had to. Like, I can go and speak in front of 500 people, that's fine. But make me sit through that yoga shit and do that hard shit and actually like feel this anger. I'm like, oh, and I'm like, I actually feel like I'm in the boxing ring with myself in my head. Like I literally feel like I'm punching myself up going, you know that it's okay, right? Yeah. You're allowed to like
I love this. Yeah, you and I talked so much about feelings in that last conversation, and you know, the idea of knowing, I think it's a real dance to understand what does it mean to feel an emotion, to process an emotion, to identify what that actually is, what emotion is a feeling, and what do I need to learn from it. And I mean, for me, at some point, you know, because I left my corporate job and I became a personal trainer. So I was training people, and, you know, people take a perception of you and they layer things upon that. And I feel like, and then we have yet another story building. It's like, Tiff, you're so strong, you're so resilient, all about resilience. And I loved resilience. And then sooner or later, and especially when I started doing this podcast, it was, hang on, all of you people chanting and fucking waving the resilience flag, half of you don't even question the difference between resilience and dissociation. They're not the fucking same thing. I'm not resilient. I mean, I was resilient. I was incredibly resilient, but also because I fucking dissociated. Like, it was a powerful tool, but if I don't recognize it for what it was and understand that it's not an every time solution, then I'm not going to learn how to manage my emotions. I'm not going to learn how to change who I am and how I relate to people. All of the jobs I had when I was younger, hospitality and customer service and sales, and I remember applying for them, and this made me laugh at some point because I went, you always tell because you love people and relationships. It's the one thing you can't even fucking do. You don't like, because I have this wall up that even I'm not familiar with. Even in today's session with Dr. Bill, we were talking about that. And I was like, I still don't think I'm very good at it. And it's hard to know because I'm in the middle of being me right now. I'm still in the middle of, I'm always going to be in the middle of me being me. That's fucking hard to have perspective on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Fucking gold, Tiff. That comment. Hang on, let me. My popcorn brain. Hang on, what was it? The disassociation is not resilience.
Yeah.
Fucking love it, because I think we're like, even myself, I've been an athlete my whole life up until just, the last few years. I've been Australian level, hammer thrower, discus shot, whatever, everything, like traveling, soccer, right? And I've always done extremely well, Australian level type stuff, right? And everyone's like, oh, you're so strong, you're so this, you're so that. And I had that was my front, right? That was my front. And when I got really injured and I couldn't do it anymore, is when I started my advocacy. I was like, oh, it's one or the other. So, but I didn't know who I was without being an athlete. Like, I literally fell apart. I had to confront myself, and I'm still learning, like, who am I without this? And, there's this whole process of becoming, because up until now, when I'm telling you that I'm going to yoga and I'm having a fucking crying session in there, trying not to let anyone see me being like a total, like, non-butch tough, like there's nothing tough about me. Look, I got my little chihuahua, right? So I'm like this big tough chick with a, like, fucking chihuahua in my pride bag, right? Like, it doesn't compute. And I'm like, I'm this, like, super tough chick who's fucking falling apart in yoga and having a big blubbering session, right? Like, it's totally ruined my credibility as a tough, strong girl. So, right?
Well, I've got to whip it, so I'm with you, mate. I'm with you.
Whip it good. But how I've been completely fucking disassociated. It's not fucking resilience. And when you said that, I was just like, oh my God, because it is so true. And until you can be fully present, like, there's moments, right, where you're really present. Like this, I'm really present right now. Like, I'm fucking loving this conversation, right? And I'm here 100%. Maybe because I went to yoga first. I don't know.
You're all zen.
Getting in my zen. Look, everybody can go to yoga. It doesn't matter if you're a big butch bitch like me or not, okay? Yoga is for everyone. But I up until recently, it's been, I didn't realize how disassociated, how completely unattached I was to myself. Like, my goals, my vision, my passion has never changed, and it will be unwavering in this space. I will be unwavering for children, and I will be unwavering for survivors for as long as I live. That is never going to change. That is my conviction. That is my call on my life, right? I know that. But who I become in that process is a journey, right? It is 100% a journey. And it takes real fucking courage when you're against the ropes and you're like, you've got that choice, right? You've got that moment where you get to step out, where you get to make those choices and you get to choose to feel, right? We can choose not to feel. We can numb that shit out with alcohol, with fucking drugs. Like, we can distract the shit out of ourselves by going and doing another thing, right? And for many years I was accused. It sounds a little bit like our journeys are very parallel. Like, I was hit by a car before I had to wake up, right? With a car accident, but I got run over. Same thing, but different, Like, it fucking hurt. That's all I know. Like, but sometimes it takes being run over by a car to wake the fuck up, right? So
Yeah, cool.
sometimes it takes being punched in the face. It's just.
I was just thinking. My popcorn brain's just popped on another subject. I wanted to.
I think it's a girl.
I was just thinking about the idea of trust, and I can't even recall which part. What trust? I can't even recall what part of what you were saying brought me to it. But
Shut up.
I think. Yeah. All right. So I was thinking about a recent training session, and I was thinking about this role playing and who I become, and looking for clues and looking for patterns. And so I went back to training with my coach and his fight crew late last year, and jumped in. And he's a pressure guy, which I love. So it's like jump in with the boys, and I remember like it was really, really overwhelming. And that pop, I just saw a pop-up screen. It made my head pop. It made me forget my train of thought. So we go back into training. Hey?
Yeah. No, go. You're in training. Go. You're in training.
I get hit a lot, everyone. I get hit a lot. This happens all the time.
She's okay, guys. It's all right, folks.
Right. So we're doing sparring, right? Heavy sparring, going all over the place. And what I recognized, so I've been playing around in my own, with my own training partners and that where I work, just having fun. And that's one version of me in the boxing ring sparring. And then I was sparring in the confines of the fight gym with my coach. And what I recognized was this understanding that, and I didn't at first, I didn't realize in the moment until quite a few sessions later that I was throwing everything I knew out the window and just grasping at listening to him at the side of the ring and just trying to somehow figure out what, like a puppet on a string, what does he want me to do? Because I had no trust in any of my skills and abilities. Now I coach people in boxing. I've had 14 fights. I'm not a beginner anymore. But what I realized after a while is I'm throwing all that away and just trying to figure out telepathically what he wants me to do, and crediting nothing that I've worked on for the past decade. And it's just a reflection of that lack of trust in myself. And the lack of trust in myself is that, and I've had trust issues with people. Like, I find it really hard to trust and to allow people to trust me. And twofold, for me, it comes down to the fact of recognizing that I couldn't trust myself on who to trust because I trusted the wrong people. And so my ability to trust went out the window.
Yeah. Can I ask you, and you can choose not to answer this, but do you think that let me see, in not trusting yourself with him, do you think that you tried to do what he wanted because you fell into like a people-pleasing type behavior, which is very much, as you know, survivors' behavior, right? We fall into patterns where we try to do what others want us to do because it's safer.
Of course.
Safer than maybe trusting ourselves. Or
yeah. And I don't know if I mentioned this to you in the last podcast about the message that I wrote to him and asked him for kind of like an assessment on what he thinks of me over these 10 years of training with him, very sporadically at times. And like the idea of understanding that there's still this role playing that happens with male figures around me, or people who I put on pedestals, and then I grow down. In the words of Dr. Bill, you grow down. Who do you become? You know, like ask Bill would ask me. Bill's my doc, Dr. Bill. He would ask me a question sometimes, and my shoulders slump, and I look like this, and I go, I don't know. And he's like, how old do you feel right now? And I literally feel like a child. I sound like a child, because you grow down, you answer from the place of the 7-year-old. Where do you go? And there's a part of that I've seen in working relationships in my life, when there's people, males and mentors and people of power, and I grow down, and I don't feel it or recognize it when I'm in the middle of it. And when I get the fuck away from it for long enough, I come out of it, and I come out of that, what I would only assume is a trauma response. And I look in and go, how could you have not seen how small you just became for so long? How did you be in the middle of that and let that change you? How did you not fucking recognize that? That's dissociation.
I just fucking love that. You have just spoken like, that is so good. It is such a beautiful perspective to put, because that's imposter syndrome, right? We call it imposterism, imposter syndrome, and it shows up because we still have these elements of shame. But I don't think I could have put that any better, because we do in our workplaces, in our family even. Like we get so little because we just don't believe that we're worthy, or we don't believe we've got the skills. We don't back ourselves. We don't trust ourselves. We don't trust our own vision. And I constantly, it's like being a research fellow. My team around me, like, they're all doctors and got PhDs and professors, and they're fucking amazing human beings, right? Here's me, like a fucking beautiful, okay, I was a great cop, all right, you know, but I'm not an academic. And so coming into this space, I have to trust, like, that I'm there for the right, they've got me there for a very specific purpose and for my very specific expertise. And I have to constantly remind myself, because I'm just like, oh my God, these people are so smart. I'm like, I can't do anything in this space, you know? And it's just, I constantly am having to challenge myself, and it's such a massive growth. I'm going through this massive growth right now, like growth I have not experienced in my time, because I've often been around really dominating men, like very strong male role models. And it's not anything against the police. It's just, it's built with the majority of leaders are men, and the majority of people who are leading teams are men, and they're so strong in their roles that I've often felt so small. But I've also been completely disassociated and never really potentially dealt with some of this stuff. And so when you're saying that, it just makes perfect sense. And so for anybody who's out there who's, you know, I guess this is a bit of a call to action, Tiff. Like, this is about you know, asking yourself the question, you know, when you're struggling, and just to take that moment when you're so overwhelmed, that you take that moment and you step back and think about what it is that you really want. Like, if it's your career or your sport, or you know, in your family, because we often make decisions that are not good for us because we are feeling small. You know, we're so scared to put boundaries in place, and we're so scared to say what we need that, you know, we shrink. And what did you call it?
Growing down.
Like, that just, you know, we want to grow up. We want to grow through. We want to,
well, we just want to take up the space that we're in.
But take up the space that we're fucking worthy of, that we deserve, that we've had, like, robbed from us. Like, it was, you know, and if we haven't been willing to feel, and we haven't been willing to take that step, or to make that plunge, or to step through that, then we're really not helping ourselves. The trauma has happened, right? But we have a responsibility to ourselves to heal. We can only do that. Only we can fucking choose that.
Yeah.
Like, we can only take those steps. It doesn't matter. You can have as many people around you as you want, and you do need the right people, right? I don't think I could be doing anything that I'm doing without the people I have in my life right now. But you've got to make that decision yourself. You have got to step through into that punch yourself and take that deep breath and fucking, it's sometimes hard to see it, like you're saying, Tiff, like, how do you know until you're away from it? But I guess that's where I'm just trying to say, maybe take that time to reflect and ask yourself the really tough questions, because if you don't give yourself that time to reflect, you're just going to be like you and me in that car, just going to do the next thing, sucking it in the big ones, like, and not letting yourself cry, not letting yourself have that time then outside the boxing ring to look back and go, fuck, like, who was I just then? What did I do? Because instead of doing that, you just go and have a beer or just go and do another thing, and you're not actually then allowing yourself the opportunity to grow through that, to get bigger through that, to become who you're meant to be, you know? That's what I think. That's kind of maybe not where we wanted to go with this whole podcast, but I think it's beautiful. I think it's popcorn. Go popcorn all the way, mate.
Yeah, I love it. I was just thinking about how it shapes our beliefs about ourselves, right? And then those beliefs become this story about who we are. And I was coaching someone recently, and just being able to recognize that big T, little t trauma, whatever the story is, whatever the thing is, if we can't recognize that our body and our unconscious can have reactions in particular moments, then we look at the facts of life, like the things at work. I don't address this the way I want, and then we bully ourselves about it. I couldn't have this conversation. I'm not good. I'm not good enough. I don't confront this. I don't confront that. And then we believe this bullshit that we then layer upon another shit story, and it just goes on and on from there.
It's just a shitstorm, mate. But we like it. Some of us like being in the shitstorm, right? Like,
yeah, I remember in that first journaling, I remember writing, and mid-sentence, I was writing about this fucker, and mid-sentence, I didn't even plan it. I asked Dr. Bruce Perry in our podcast, I said, why did I write that? Why did my brain go to this place? Because there's a part of doing the work that we're accountable for, and then there's a part of the timing is right, the environment's right, and our mind takes us to where is a healing place. Not everyone is ready to be there yet, and I'm trying to figure out how the fuck do we get everyone, how do we allow people to be ready? But I'm halfway through a sentence and I start writing, maybe I should thank this guy, because I would never hand back the traits that I have now. I would never hand back this tenacity and fucking go get it, determination and bullishness that lives inside me. And yeah, it slips in and out in moments, and I've got some challenges, but fuck, I ain't giving that back. So if that goes with that, then I'll take it. And that, I was curious about that. I was like, I've worked on a lot of my mindset, but I didn't work on that. That came to me like it was a part of it. It came at the right time. It's phenomenal.
You fucking, I just want to give you a big hug and then punch you at the same time.
That's love for me, mate. That's love.
Yeah. Oh, I figured that might be a bit your love language. Just get that hug and punch it.
Punching the snobs.
Oh God, no! But you're speaking about things that I've only kind of really dared to think about. I think it's so great that you're actually vocalizing some of this stuff, because it's so powerful. I've often had the thought myself, I'm like, fucking, I love that I can compartmentalize like a fucking boss, and I love that I can disassociate, because I wouldn't be able to get up here on this stage. But fucking, I am wanting to punch the living fuck out of him right now, because I'm like, I hate these fucking panic attacks. I hate having this PTSD shit. And you fucker, and you know what? It's okay to be angry. I'm kind of learning to embrace the fact that I have emotions about this. But I think you're really hitting on something valuable. And I think that out of all of this chaos and this trauma, that we do have this tenacity, and we do have these amazing things that we develop and grow out of this dark space that becomes really powerful. And I think it's just about embracing those parts of ourselves and accepting them. It's, I mean, I don't know if we want to say thank you for the trauma, like, because I grieve, and this is probably a whole other podcast we can step into, is grief about who would I have been otherwise. That's a question I'm always asking. Like, who would I have been without this abuse? Who would I have managed to become? Like, would I be a deadbeat in a little country town? Or would I be like a leader in my country town? Would I have gone overseas? Would I have had the tenacity and the ability to get myself overseas or do these amazing and have these amazing experiences if it wasn't for my fucking attitude that I'm going to fucking do this. I'm going to do this and I'm going to keep doing this until I get what I want. If you tell me that, Kel, you can't do this, I'm going to fucking do it. I'm going to do it. You can't say I can't do something because I'll turn it around and I'll make it happen. But I grieve who that other person might have been because I don't know who that is. But what kind of energy am I going to waste on wondering who that is, and what kind of stress and trauma am I going to put myself in just trying to think about who I could have been when this is who I am. And there are good things that have come out of this, because we often beat the shit out of ourselves and say, well, it's all fucked. Yeah. It's all fucked. It's not all fucked.
I think there's massive power available to us, but it's not fucking easy, right? But there's power in having the right conversations with ourselves and with people around us, being in the right environment and being able to shape our own understanding and mindset and language. This is a hard dance though, right? Because it takes a self-aware person who knows where they're at to have the right people and relationships, to have the right conversation at the right time. Because if any of those, the right conversation at the wrong time's the wrong fucking conversation and a bad result. And how do you navigate? It comes back to, well, what does it mean to, like, we don't want to suppress guilt, anger, and all that shit. Like bitterness, there's a place for that and a function, but there's also, we have this ability to write our story and own it in an empowering way. People like Peter Crone, if you've never heard of him, I had him on my podcast. It went nuts because he croned me. His ability to talk about this stuff and the language he uses, it was a really powerful episode. It was fucking years ago now, but his ability to squash that, what you've just articulated, to squash that shit and reframe it in a really respectful way that can come in and you can accept it and go, okay, I see that. And it doesn't change you. It doesn't change you tomorrow, but to be able to navigate through this shit and not suppress and not just, it's hard, right? But it's available to us. And I think only with conversations like this, perhaps.
Yeah, but I guess it's kind of having the safe space and the right people to reflect the conversation. And totally, most of the stories that we tell ourselves have become beliefs because we've had to tell ourselves that for things to make sense, right?
Yeah.
So that's where it comes from, and reframing is really hard. In the survivors course that I'm developing, there's some great tools. Once I finally get that done, which hopefully won't be too far away. But you can, if you jump on to download my free ebook, Reclaim Your Freedom, you'll be on my mailing list, which I don't mail anyone yet, guys, but once the course is out, you will be the first to know. So you can grab that. But there are some strategies, exactly what you're talking about, Tiff, in terms of reframing the way that we think, and putting it in a way so that we can start to internalize a different story, a more of a truth, because for most of these stories, we don't actually have evidence that it's real.
Yeah.
We ask ourselves, what evidence do I have? Like if I said to myself, I'm completely unlovable, I can't have relationships. You said some things before. I'm bad at relationships. Well, are you really?
Mm-hmm.
And what evidence do you have to show that you really are and exploring this through a series of questions. And it will always come back down to something you've told yourself, something somebody else told you or made you believe. And often it comes down to the perpetrator keeping you silent or shaming you into a space so that he or they can keep offending. And it's very difficult. But once you do that, you start to go, oh, that's actually not true. That's actually not true about me.
What do you think? What's your experience been with logic versus actually dialogue and conversations? And when I say that, like, we can read and understand. I don't know if I mentioned this to you last time, that idea that Bill, I remember in one of our early sessions, he was explaining psychotherapy to me and talking about the fact that, their number one job is like, or their philosophy is, you believe what you hear yourself say. So it's about talking, right? And he said that, and then we got into a session, and then he's doing the whole fucking little Tiff thing, and she's sitting on a chair over in the corner, and I've got to look at her and fucking have a little chat. And he made me look at her, and and it was about fault. He goes, do you, is it her fault? And the thing is, before this conversation, in my head, I'm like, of course it fucking was. Like, I know that. I'm not dumb. Like, but I looked over in the corner and I visualized this girl and I couldn't say it. And I was like, fuck, Bill, I think it's her fault. And I didn't think I thought that, but I couldn't say it. I couldn't say it when I had to say it to a person because I didn't believe it. And I thought I believed it. And that's where it can get really fucking tricky. It's like, well, I know that, but some shit is keeping me stuck. It's because we don't even know what we fucking believe half the time.
It pays to do the work. And I know exactly what you're saying. And for many of us, and I'm going to say this again, just before we close up, because we're pretty much at the end of our time. But if you're a victim survivor and you're out there and you're listening to this, both Tiff and I unequivocally stand with you that child abuse is never the fault of the child. You 100% did nothing wrong. And sometimes it takes years and years and years because, like Tiff said, we fucking know it's not our fault. But we don't internalize that belief because from the very beginning, we have been groomed and manipulated and betrayed by people that we thought we could trust, right? Sometimes it's somebody that you don't know, but most of the time for many of us, it's the 89%. It's somebody that we know, like, and trust in our relationships. And when I say that, people within our family circle or somebody who's known to our family, right? So I just want to reiterate that from us as survivors, from Tiff and myself, we stand with you, we see you. It is not your fault. And I will continue to say this forever until you start to internalize the belief that you did fucking nothing wrong. You did nothing wrong. Just really quickly, Tiff, we've run out of time, but if you want to get hold of Tiff, her website is just below on the ticker bar there. Go to rollwiththepunches.com.au. And Tiff, just really quickly, if you can just give like a 30-second rundown of your podcast, because it is fantastic. You got some great guests on there. So you can subscribe to Tiff's podcast.
Yeah, 30-second rundown. I just talk to people all over the world about what it takes, what it means, what it is to roll with the punches, and whether that's talking to survivors like yourself of things like this or physical traumas, or whether it's speaking to some of the best people in the world about the academic stuff, how the brain works, how the body works, how, fucking anything. It's just about fucking figuring this biological Ferrari out that we're getting around in.
How the popcorn works, mate.
How the fucking popcorn works.
That's it. Guys, thank you so much for all being part of our live audience if you've been on. And for those of you listening, thank you so much. Again, if you need anything, please reach out to me at my website, kellyhumphries.com. And I'm just going to real quick chuck up the boxer, Mark Seymour and the undertow. So, Tiff, we didn't even get to talk about that. But if you would love to have a look at that, it is just fucking inspirational. Check it out. I think what we're going to have to do, Tiff, is get you back for a second round in the ring, round 2 in the boxing ring, right? And I'll be sure to crack out the jokes. And by then, I would have been to the Chubby's boxing around the corner in the dungeon. And
I can't wait.
Oh, mate, I'm scared as fuck. But anyway, I'm going to do some boxing, guys. You can hold me accountable to making sure I show up to the dungeon and get my face potentially. The whole idea, just like I got 10 seconds, the whole idea is I'm never going to get hit. I'm going to be so good, I'm never going to get hit, right?
I wish I had that theory when I started.
But guys, thank you so much. I love your faces. Fortnight's time, guys, live back here again, Tuesday night, 8 p.m. I will see you then. Thank you so much, Tiff, for being part of tonight's convo.
Thank you.
All right. Peace out, guys. See ya.